Lieutenant Kevin Miller stepped directly into the veteran's path as he approached the gangway. "Sir, I need to see proper authorization before you can board this vessel." The older man reached into his worn jacket and produced a standard military ID. Miller barely glanced at it before shaking his head. "This doesn't give you access to an active Navy destroyer. You'll need to contact the appropriate channels and request permission through official Navy protocols." Behind them, several crew members paused their duties to watch the exchange. The veteran stood quietly, his weathered hands holding the ID steady. His gray hair was neatly trimmed, and despite his civilian clothes, something about his posture spoke of decades of military bearing. "I've been boarding Navy ships for 40 years, son." The veteran's voice carried the kind of calm authority that comes from commanding respect in the most dangerous situations imaginable. "Perhaps you should double-check your access lists before making assumptions." Miller's jaw tightened. "Sir, I don't care how long you think you've been doing anything. I have my orders, and unauthorized personnel do not board this ship. Period. The regulations are clear, and I follow them to the letter." Other sailors began gathering at a respectful distance, sensing tension in the air. The veteran noticed their growing audience, but remained perfectly composed, as if he'd faced far more challenging situations than one stubborn junior officer. The veteran folded his ID carefully and returned it to his jacket. "Before you make the situation any more difficult for yourself, Lieutenant, I suggest you look a little more carefully at who you're talking to. Are you questioning my authority?" Miller crossed his arms and stepped closer to the veteran. "I'm not questioning anything, sir. I'm following direct orders. This is a restricted military vessel, and you don't have the proper clearance. I suggest you turn around and leave before this becomes a bigger problem." The veteran remained motionless for a moment, then slowly reached up and adjusted his jacket collar. As he did, a small patch became visible on his left chest, partially hidden beneath the fabric. The insignia was distinctive, featuring crossed anchors surrounded by a unique pattern that Miller had never seen before. The lieutenant's eyes fixed on the patch, and his confident expression began to falter. His face went pale as recognition dawned. The patch wasn't just any military insignia. It was something far more significant than anything he'd encountered in his 4 years of service. Miller's hand trembled as he reached for his radio. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Admiral Richardson, this is Lieutenant Miller at the gangway. I need you down here immediately, sir. We have a situation that requires your personal attention." The radio crackled with the Admiral's stern voice. "What kind of situation, Lieutenant?" Miller stared at the veteran, who continued to wait patiently, his expression unchanged. "Sir, there's someone here who has credentials I don't recognize. I think I may have made an error in judgment." Nearby sailors exchanged glances, sensing something significant was unfolding. The veteran simply stood there, hands at his sides, watching as the young officer's authority crumbled before his eyes. The Admiral's voice boomed through the radio with unmistakable urgency. "Lieutenant Miller, describe this person's appearance immediately. What exactly are you looking at?" Miller's hands shook as he held the radio. "Sir, he's an older gentleman, gray hair, wearing civilian clothes. But he has a patch on his jacket that I've never seen before. It has crossed anchors with some kind of special insignia around it." There was a long pause on the radio that made everyone within earshot hold their breath. When Admiral Richardson finally spoke again, his voice carried a tone that made Miller's blood run cold. "Lieutenant, step back from that man immediately. Do not say another word to him until I arrive. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Miller stammered, his face now completely drained of color. "I'm on my way." The radio went silent. Word began spreading quickly among the crew members who had witnessed the exchange. Whispered conversations started among the sailors as they tried to piece together what was happening. Some of the older petty officers moved closer, their expressions growing more serious as they caught glimpses of the veteran's patch. The veteran remained perfectly calm throughout the chaos, occasionally nodding politely to crew members who met his eyes. He seemed completely unbothered by the commotion he had caused, as if situations like this were routine for him. Miller stood frozen, staring alternately at the veteran and at the gangway, dreading the moment when Admiral Richardson would appear. Heavy footsteps echoed across the deck as Admiral Richardson approached at a near run, his face grim with determination. Behind him, two senior officers struggled to keep pace, clearly sensing the urgency of the situation. The crowd of sailors instinctively parted as the Admiral reached the gangway. His eyes immediately found the veteran, and his expression shifted from concern to something approaching awe. He stopped 3 feet away and stood perfectly still, taking in every detail of the man before him. Chief Petty Officer Williams, one of the ship's most experienced sailors, caught sight of the veteran's patch and his eyes widened. He grabbed the arm of a younger sailor next to him and whispered urgently, "Do you see that insignia? I've only heard stories about men who wear that patch." Miller remained frozen in place, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool ocean breeze. The weight of his mistake was becoming clearer with each passing second as he watched the Admiral's reaction. Other crew members began whispering among themselves, trying to piece together fragments of information. The older sailors seemed to recognize something significant, while the younger ones looked confused but increasingly nervous. Admiral Richardson finally spoke, his voice carrying across the deck with unmistakable respect. "Sir, I apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced. My lieutenant was simply following standard protocol, but clearly he wasn't aware of your special status." The veteran nodded slightly, but remained silent, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. Admiral Richardson stepped forward and rendered a crisp salute that sent shockwaves through every sailor watching. "Commander Thomas Burke, it is an honor to have you aboard, sir. I should have been notified of your arrival personally." The name hit the assembled crew like a thunderbolt. Commander Burke. Even the youngest sailors had heard whispers of that legendary name during their training. The man who had single-handedly saved an entire carrier battle group during the most classified naval operation in recent history. Burke returned the salute with practiced precision, his weathered features showing the faintest hint of a smile. "Admiral, no notification was necessary. I was simply conducting a routine inspection of fleet readiness protocols. Your lieutenant was following proper procedure for unauthorized personnel." Miller's knees nearly buckled as the full weight of his actions crashed down on him. He had blocked Commander Thomas Burke, the legendary naval officer whose tactics were still taught at the Naval Academy, whose classified missions had saved thousands of lives. The Admiral's voice carried across the deck with unmistakable authority. "Lieutenant Miller, you will escort Commander Burke to my ready room immediately. And Miller, consider this a learning experience about the importance of recognizing true authority when you see it." Burke placed a gentle hand on Miller's shoulder. "Son, you are doing your job. Never apologize for following orders and protecting your ship. That instinct will serve you well in your career." The crew watched in amazement as their intimidating admiral deferred completely to this unassuming civilian. As they walked toward the ready room, Admiral Richardson spoke loud enough for the nearby crew to hear. "Commander, your tactical innovations during Operation Neptune's Shield are still referenced in our current training manuals. The way you coordinated that 3-carrier defense against overwhelming odds changed naval warfare doctrine forever." Chief Williams leaned toward a group of younger sailors and whispered with reverence. "That man developed the Burke maneuver. When enemy submarines had our entire Pacific Fleet surrounded, he used a decoy strategy that saved 12 ships and 4,000 sailors. They named it after him." Burke nodded modestly as they reached the Admiral's quarters. "That operation taught me the importance of unconventional thinking, Admiral. Sometimes the most effective solutions come from sources others might overlook or underestimate." Miller followed behind them, still processing the magnitude of his earlier confrontation. The stories he'd heard during his Naval Academy training suddenly took on new meaning. This was the man whose innovative sonar tactics had revolutionized submarine detection, whose leadership under fire had earned him 3 Navy crosses. The Admiral opened his ready room door with obvious respect. "Sir, your permanent access clearance extends to any vessel in the fleet." Your contributions to naval strategy and your sacrifice during the classified missions in the South China Sea earned you that privilege for life. Burke paused at the threshold. Admiral, I'm afraid our conversation may need to wait. Your ship appears to have a more pressing concern that requires immediate attention. As if summoned by Burke's words, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun appeared at the Admiral's side, her face etched with concern. Admiral, we have a critical situation in the engine room. Our main propulsion system is experiencing cascading failures that our engineering team cannot diagnose. The Admiral's expression grew grave. How critical are we talking, Commander? Sir, we've lost primary power to both main engines. The diagnostic systems are showing error codes that don't match anything in our technical manuals. Chief Engineer Rodriguez says we're looking at complete propulsion failure within the next 2 hours if we can't identify the source of the malfunction. Burke listened intently as Chun continued to report. The failure pattern started in our integrated control systems and spread to the mechanical components. Our most experienced engineers are stumped, and we're dead in the water in hostile territory with no way to call for immediate assistance. Admiral Richardson ran his hand through his hair, the weight of command evident on his face. We have a diplomatic mission scheduled in 18 hours that cannot be delayed. The political ramifications of missing that deadline could affect international relations for years. Burke stepped forward quietly. Admiral, if I may ask, what specific symptoms are your engines displaying? The pattern Commander Chun described sounds familiar to something I encountered during my service with the experimental propulsion programs. The Admiral looked at Burke with sudden hope. Commander, would you be willing to take a look at our situation? Burke nodded without hesitation. Admiral, I'd be honored to assist. Lead the way to your engine room. As they descended into the ship's depths, Burke's demeanor shifted from polite visitor to focused naval engineer. The sounds and vibrations of the failing systems seemed to speak to him in a language decades of experience had taught him to understand. Chief Engineer Rodriguez looked up from a diagnostic panel, sweat beading on his forehead. Admiral, I've run every test in the book. The computer systems are giving us error codes I've never seen, and the mechanical components are failing in a sequence that defies logic. Burke approached the main control console and placed his hands on the vibrating metal housing. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the rhythm of the dying engines. This isn't a mechanical failure, Chief. You're looking at a cascading electromagnetic interference pattern. Rodriguez stared at him in confusion. Sir, our EMP shielding is rated for military specifications. Nothing should be able to penetrate our systems like this. Burke moved to a secondary panel and began examining the readouts with practiced efficiency. Chief, your shielding is perfect for external threats, but this interference is coming from within your own systems. Someone installed a component that's creating a feedback loop through your integrated networks. The engineering team gathered around as Burke traced connections with his finger, identifying pathways that the ship's own crew had missed. His understanding of both legacy and modern naval technology was immediately apparent. Burke rolled up his sleeves and moved to the primary control station. Chief Rodriguez, I need you to isolate power to sections 7 through 12 while maintaining emergency lighting. Petty Officer Johnson, start tracing the fiber optic lines from the main junction box to the secondary processors. The engineering crew moved with renewed purpose under Burke's clear direction. His commands were precise and confident, drawing on knowledge that spanned both decades-old systems and cutting-edge technology. Rodriguez followed Burke's instructions while shaking his head in amazement. Sir, how did you know to check the fiber optic integration points? That's not even in our standard troubleshooting protocols. Burke knelt beside an access panel and began carefully disconnecting components. During my work with the experimental fleet programs, we encountered similar interference patterns when newer digital systems were retrofitted onto ships with older electromagnetic architectures. The feedback creates a cascade failure that appears random, but follows a predictable pattern. As Burke worked, his hands moved with the precision of someone who had performed these procedures countless times under far more dangerous conditions. The crew watched in fascination as he identified and bypassed the problematic connections that had baffled their diagnostic equipment. Within 30 minutes, the irregular vibrations in the engine housing began to stabilize. The error codes on the diagnostic screens shifted from critical alerts to cautionary warnings, then gradually cleared entirely. Johnson looked up from his station with excitement. "Commander, engine power is returning to normal parameters. All systems are showing green across the board." The engine room filled with the steady hum of fully operational systems as Burke completed the final diagnostic checks. Admiral Richardson arrived just as the last warning light switched from amber to green, his face showing profound relief. Chief Rodriguez wiped his hands on a shop rag and shook his head in disbelief. "Commander, in 23 years of naval engineering, I've never seen anyone diagnose and repair a system failure that complex in under 2 hours. You saved our mission and possibly our careers." Burke stood up from the control panel and brushed dust from his jacket. "Chief, you and your team did the work. I simply had the advantage of having seen similar problems during the experimental programs. Experience is only valuable when it's shared with capable people." The engineering crew gathered around Burke, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. Petty Officer Johnson spoke for the group when he said, "Sir, we've been trained on these systems for years, but you understood them in ways that our manuals never taught us." Lieutenant Miller appeared in the engine room doorway, still looking somewhat shaken from his earlier encounter. He had followed the crisis from a distance, watching as the man he had blocked from boarding single-handedly solved their most critical problem. Admiral Richardson placed his hand on Burke's shoulder. "Commander, because of your intervention, we'll make our diplomatic rendezvous on schedule. You've prevented what could have been an international incident while demonstrating why your reputation as a problem solver is legendary throughout the fleet." As Burke prepared to leave the ship, the entire crew had gathered on deck to see him off. What had begun as a routine inspection visit had become a defining moment in their naval careers, a reminder that true expertise often comes in unexpected packages. Lieutenant Miller stepped forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine humility. "Commander Burke, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond words. I let assumptions cloud my judgment and nearly prevented you from helping when we needed it most." Burke extended his hand to the young officer. "Lieutenant, never apologize for protecting your ship and following orders. Your instincts were correct, your execution was proper, and your willingness to learn from this experience will make you a better naval officer. The Navy needs people who take their responsibilities seriously." Admiral Richardson addressed the assembled crew. "Gentlemen, today you witnessed something that will become part of this ship's history. Commander Burke's service record speaks for itself, but his actions today prove that true naval excellence never retires." As Burke walked down the gangway, Chief Rodriguez called out, "Sir, this crew will remember what you did here today. You set a standard that will carry forward in everything we do." Burke turned back one final time, his weathered face showing the satisfaction of a job well done. The real heroes are the sailors who keep these ships running every day, protecting freedoms that most people take for granted. Have you ever misjudged someone based on first impressions, only to discover their true capabilities later? Share your story in the comments below. The final phase of repairs required Burke's most delicate work as he recalibrated the integrated control systems to prevent future cascade failures. His weathered hands moved across the complex interfaces with surgical precision, each adjustment based on decades of understanding how naval systems interact under stress. Rodriguez watched intently as Burke fine-tuned the electromagnetic shielding parameters. "Commander, these calibrations you're making aren't in any of our technical documentation. How do you know the exact specifications needed?" Burke paused his work to explain his methodology. "Chief, during the experimental programs, we learned that every ship develops its own electromagnetic signature based on how the crew operates the systems. These calibrations account for your specific operational patterns and prevent the interference from recurring." The engineering team gathered closer as Burke demonstrated diagnostic techniques that went far beyond their standard training. He showed them how to identify early warning signs of system conflicts and how to prevent cascade failures before they could begin. As Burke completed the final adjustments, the ship's engines achieved a level of efficiency that exceeded their original specifications. The vibrations that had plagued the vessel for months disappeared entirely, replaced by the smooth hum of perfectly synchronized machinery. Admiral Richardson arrived to witness the completion of Burke's work. The diagnostic panels showed performance levels that surpassed anything the crew had achieved since the ship's commissioning, a testament to Burke's mastery of naval engineering.